And we're pleased to welcome from London H.A. Hellier, Senior Fellow in Geopolitics at the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI. And thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure, Francois. Always good to be with you.
So this Oman question is just symptomatic of the broader confusion that we're kind of feeling. We don't know whether we're closer to war or to peace.
Well, in terms of war with Oman, I don't think people should really be thinking that that's terribly likely. I don't think that the United States intends on bombing Oman, despite the fact that the American president spoke so poorly in that regard yesterday. But I don't think that there's really any chance of that. It would upset far too many relationships between the United States and its Gulf Arab allies, I'm sure. But when it comes to the war between the United States, Israel, and Iran, indeed, there's been a leak about an MOU having been all but agreed, but waiting for the final sign-off from Donald Trump. But we haven't seen that confirmed as of yet, and until it's actually signed and delivered and actually put into effect, I think lots of things can go wrong. You have the Israeli spoiler factor as well, which has been very clear over the last few days, with the Israelis striking deeper and further into Lebanese territory, where it already occupies quite a significant swathe of territory, but now striking Beirut as well, as I think your report just mentioned. And of course, the Israelis are making it very clear they don't want this to end. They want a return to war with regards to the Iranians. And of course, there are escalations that are underway with regards to Gaza and the West Bank as well. So, a few things could still go wrong, and any one of them could completely scupper this. I think the main point in favor of being optimistic about a deal is that neither the United States nor the Iranians want to go back to full-scale war. It's just a question if they're willing to do what it takes to have another option instead.
Yeah, so on the balance, there's, as you say, those who have a stake in prolonging the war. You mentioned Israel's prime minister, who's now heading into an election campaign. There's also hardliners inside of Iran, as Hezbollah, as our correspondent said, that wants no part of any agreements. On the other hand, we've seen this Thursday new figures out of the United States. Inflation at its highest level in 3 years. At the end of the day, does Donald Trump simply look at that figure and say it's all over?
So just a few things. One, it's not Israel's prime minister that wants to return to war in Iran. The war against Iran is really quite popular in Israel. It's not a polarizing issue in that regard. I think it's quite widespread. When it comes to Iranian hardliners, of course, I mean, this is a very ideological regime, but I think the Iranians want a deal, and I think they've made it quite clear that they want a deal. They simply don't want a deal that makes it look like they surrendered or capitulated. When it comes to the United States, again, I think Donald Trump wants a deal. I think it's very clear he wants a deal. He just wants a deal that's going to be able to make it seem as though the United States didn't really lose that badly when it came to this particular war. So everybody's looking for a way to make it seem as though they're coming out of this not quite so badly. Of course, when it comes to the Iranians, they set a very low bar for victory. Their very low bar was simply, we survive. The regime doesn't change. We're not overthrown. So in that regard, they've done well, in quotation marks, because again, the bar is extremely low. When it comes to the United States, they set the bar really high, and they kept on changing the bar on a regular basis. Regime change, degrading the Navy, missile capacity. It kept on changing all the time. So I do think that it's going to be difficult, but I think everybody has an interest in getting past this now. And that's the single biggest reason for optimism with regards to this deal.
H.A. Hellier, you mentioned this report out of Washington by the Axios news agency, which says that a deal is almost ready. There are now U.S. sources, according to the Reuters news agency, who say that this memorandum of understanding is in the works. But this memorandum of understanding isn't a final deal. It's simply a 60-day ceasefire. So
yeah,
are we talking about we won't get closure out of this. Is this going to run and run and run and run?
So the MOU, you're very right to be skeptical. The MOU is indeed an MOU. So it's a deal to have discussions around a deal. So it's designed to be able to let both the Americans and the Iranians say the war is over, while kicking down the road the really sort of hardcore issues where there are severe gaps, particularly around the nuclear file. I don't think the Strait of Hormuz will be one of those things that gets kicks down the road. I think that they'll actually get much more clarity on that sooner rather than later. But the nuclear file definitely, I think, is very unlikely to be a part of this MOU. And there's nothing there about missile capacity. There's nothing there about support for allied proxies around the region, which is all going to make the Gulf Arab countries feel rather uncomfortable. But I share your skepticism in the sense that no, this does not end everything. This simply makes it clear that everybody wants to move beyond war and continue the path of diplomacy.
It's also you like the word transparent, but we're more transparent than any. Move forward if there's no deal. To the best of my knowledge, press has never been a memorandum of understanding.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you, Philip Turl, because the microphone there it doesn't seem to be working. We'll try to reconnect. Philip, you were saying you wanted to add something to what H.A.
Yeah, I was just going to say that this memorandum of understanding, it's true, is not a final peace deal. Donald Trump wants to get out. He needs an off-ramp. He's looking at the figures you were mentioning, the inflation figures. He's looking at the rising costs of living in the United States. And the opinion poll ratings, over 60% of Americans don't think the war in Iran is going very well, and they blame Donald Trump for that. He needs an off-ramp ahead of the upcoming midterm elections. So if he can't get a final deal, which appears that he's struggling very much to be able to do that right now with this, yes, we're close, no, we're not close, we're not going to take any deal, we're going to make sure that if there is a deal, we're not going to have to re-bomb Iran later. So this could be a sort of part-time off-ramp. Well, we've got a memorandum of understanding with the Iranians, but in fact that's not a final peace deal, but it's a way to getting towards a final peace deal, and therefore I can say it's a victorious step forward for Donald Trump and for the U.S. administration.
Let's talk about those other talks, H.A. Hellier, that are happening Friday in Washington between Israel and Lebanon. We've talked about Israel, we've talked about Hezbollah. How about the Lebanese government? Is it playing its cards right?
So just to follow up on what your previous guest said, or your international editor, another factor I think is playing out in the White House right now, which relates to Friday, which again is the Israeli spoil factor. The Israelis have shown time and again that they are quite happy to move in a direction that does not match with America's interests. And then it becomes a question as to whether or not whoever's the president of the United States at the time is willing to use the tremendous leverage that the United States does have over the Israelis to bring them back into line. And unfortunately, it's been shown time and again that successive American presidents have been fairly unwilling in this regard. There have been some exceptions. So when it comes to these talks that you mentioned between the Israelis and the Lebanese government are in an incredibly difficult position. They have the Israelis on the one hand, which are occupying large swathes of southern Lebanese territory and bombing all over Lebanon. So this is not exactly a party that's showing that it's interested in a peaceful process going forward. It also has the issue of Hezbollah, which is a non-state actor in Lebanon, which seems to be far more aligned with Tehran and with the Iranian regime than it is with its own government in Lebanon itself, which is frankly really intolerable. You have the Lebanese government trying really hard to be able to maintain security across the country through the Lebanese armed forces, and asking for international assistance with regards to those armed forces. But this is something else that I don't think people really remember very much. The Israelis lobbied for years whenever there was talk of support for the Lebanese armed forces to developing it, because they didn't want to have a strong Lebanese armed forces on the other side of the border. And the Israelis can't have it both ways. They can't have a weak Lebanese state because they don't want to have a strong one on the other side of its border, be it in Lebanon or Syria for that matter. And at the same time, expect it to be strong enough that it's going to be able to rein in Hezbollah. It's got to choose.
H.A. Hellier, many thanks for joining us from London. And I want to thank as well Philip Turrell from our International Affairs Desk.